Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to continue with square roots in our discussion here on perfect square and cube roots. So these are called perfect square and cube roots because the answers are nice whole numbers. They're not going to have any decimals in them. We'll deal with that next week, okay? So let's just start with the symbol that we're going to be using. Today we're going to throw a few brand new symbols at you, starting with this one. So this is known as I'll write it down. This is known as a root symbol. It's also known as a radical. So you may hear it referred to as a root symbol, which is more common, but sometimes people will say it's a radical. So it's known as a root or radical symbol. And most of the time, if we're dealing with anything other than square roots, there's going to be a little number above this little dash portion. So it would look something like this. It would have some number n, 3 if it's a cube root, 4 if it's a fourth root, 5 if it's a fifth root, and then the radical or root symbol there. Okay? Now, I'm going to write something down. So it turns out that we hardly use a 2 for the square root. I'm going to just so you know, we hardly ever use this. Every so often you'll see it, especially if it's kind of an old textbook or something. But really, you never see the 2 for square roots. So for that reason, we will use just this without the 2 for square roots. Okay. Just want to point that out because whenever you see it without the little number up in the upper left, it means it's a square root. And let's talk about what square roots are. Okay, square roots is when we use that symbol. It's basically the opposite of squaring a number. You remember what it means to square a number? Like 5 squared? What does it mean, 5 squared? Think about it. 5 to the second power is another way of saying that. Yeah, it's to the 2 power. So it means something times itself. Okay? So let's look at the meaning of a square root. If you have, for example, this, the square root of, say, let's do 16. Square root of 16 means what number squared equals 16? That's really what it means. What number to the second power equals 16? 4. Because 4 times 4 because 4 times 4, which is 4 squared, equals 16. So the square root of 16 is 4. Okay? If that makes sense to you, then these square roots are actually pretty easy. Okay? Now, the thing that you got to worry about is, well, you got to know 5 times 5, 7 times 7, 8 times 8, 9 times 9. And then once you get into double digit numbers, it gets kind of messy. So as soon as I see everyone finish writing, I want to show you a couple of things I have for you. I think that will help you out. I think I showed this to you Wednesday, but I just want to point it out again. So let me get out of the screen for a moment, and let me show you on. It's going to be located in 2 places. And the first location is in this week's folder where it says roots, estimate roots. I'm sorry, no. In roots, estimate roots, that one actually. You want to go to where it says perfect squares and cubes. It's located here. The other location it's going to be located permanently is if you go all the way to the bottom where it says toolbox. Within the toolbox, it's going to be here. And it's a document that, let me show you. If I open it, and you could print it out, you could download it onto your Chromebook if you like, just by going print or download. It's a table, right? Did we look at this last time? Okay, so it's a table that has the numbers 1 through 30 on the first column. Then the second column are perfect squares. So 3 squared is 9 because it's 3 times 3. 11 squared is 121 because it's 11 times 11. 24 squared is 576. So if you need to know the square root of, say, 576, right, it's 24. Because 24 times 24 is 576. So this is really going to help you, especially with those bigger numbers. So now we know the square root of 289 is 17. Okay, so I recommend you keep this handy when you're doing the assignments for today. It's also going to help you with perfect cubes, which we'll get to in a little while. Okay, so back to the notes. All right, so let's go ahead and get right into this and practice this. Let's say we want, let's practice. We'll just do some. Number 1. Let's say we want the square root of 36. Here we're asking what number times itself is 36? 6. 6 times 6 is 36. Okay. The other option, you could have looked on that table, look for 36, go to the left and see that it's 6. Okay? I'll just write this down. So 36 to the second power equals, I'm sorry, not 36, 6 to the second power. Six to the second power is 36. Okay, that's why that works. All right. Now, what if I do this? Number 2, negative square root of 36. The negative's here, right? So the negative is there. So think of order of operations. This is kind of like an exponent. Okay? So you do the exponent first. What's the square root of 36? And if there's a negative outside, it makes it negative 36. Okay? So that was pretty easy. Okay. We're on a roll. Number 3. Let's do the square root of 64. Yes. Well, hold on. Let me take care of this. First, you find it's like order of operations. You do whatever the operation tells you, which the square root of 30. Oh, 6. I see. I did that again. I apologize. It's negative 6. I see what you're saying. I apologize. It's negative 6. Okay. Square root of 64. What number times itself is 64? 8. So the square root of 64 is 8. Okay. Now the negative was outside and it was a negative answer, right? What if the negative is inside? Let's see if that changes anything. So here we were saying, what number times itself equals 64? Well, 8. Here we're saying, what number times itself equals negative 64? It would make sense that it's negative 8, right? Negative 8 times negative 8. What do you get when you multiply a negative times itself? A positive. But that's not negative, right? We need a negative. And so if I do negative 8 times negative 8, that's positive 64. So it can't be negative 8, even though that's probably the one that made more sense. And we know it can't be 8, right? Because 8 times 8 is positive 64. And so is negative 8 times negative 8. What number times itself do you think would give me negative 64? The only way I can get a negative by multiplying is multiplying one negative and one positive. And they're not equal, right? One's negative, one's positive. They're not equal. Yeah, but that's the problem. They have to be the same number. You see what I'm saying? So is it ever going to happen? Here's what, if you ever get a negative inside a square root, this is what you write. It's a no real solution when you have a negative inside the square root. Okay? No real solution. Because it's impossible to multiply a number with itself and get a negative answer. Okay? Well, yeah. That's something you should know. And so it's actually a rule. Make sure this is kind of a biggie here. Basically, the square root of a negative number has no real solution. Write this down. The square root of a negative number has no real solution. And it sounds kind of weird that I'm saying it that way, but I'll explain. Yes. Okay, we'll get into those tomorrow. Not tomorrow. On Monday. Yeah, we'll get into estimating square roots. Yeah. Okay. So you're already thinking there's all kinds of numbers that when you multiply and time themselves, we're kind of hitting the easier ones, but that's true. We'll get into the tougher square roots soon. Do me a favor, you two, close those Chromebooks. Close them up. Okay. Now, so bottom line, if this happens, just write no real solution. If you have something like this, the square root with a negative inside, just say no solution. Okay. All right. But negatives can exist only if they're outside. If they're outside, we're good with that, not inside. Okay. The other thing that'll happen, and will be on the assignment, will probably be on the test as well, is something like this. Number 5. Square root of 25 over, let's do 121. Go ahead and write down that one. Square root of 25 over 121. It's a fraction, right? But what do you notice about the numbers 25 and 121? Yeah, they're odd. They're also going to be perfect squares. 5 times 5 is 25, right? 11 times 11 is... So you can do this, look. You're allowed to break this up. Break it up into 2 smaller square roots. You can do that. And now I could just find the answer. The square root of 25 is 5. The square root of 121 is... So the answer is just 5/11. Okay? So just find the square root of the numerator, find the square root of the denominator, see what you get as an answer. Okay? I'm going to throw another symbol at you, though. Okay? Number 6. Have you ever seen this symbol, a plus with a minus below it? Have you ever seen that, plus with a minus below it? Okay, if you ever seen it in a calculator and wondering what it's for this situation. Let's say I have this. Plus or minus the square root of 81, yes? Yeah. It's where you get both answers. The positive version of the answer and the negative version of the answer. This is called the plus minus symbol. Very good. Plus minus symbol. Okay? What that means is there's going to be 2 answers. Well, first of all, what's the square root of 81? 9. 9 times 9 is 81. However, here, if we want to answer this, we would say the following. And it doesn't matter which one goes first. You can do the positive one first or the negative one first. But you want to say the answer is 9 or negative 9. Okay? When you see the plus minus, you're giving both possible answers because both are possible, guys. 9 times 9, that's 81. What's negative 9 times negative 9? Well, remember, a negative times a negative is a, yeah, so they both give you that 81. So both of them are possible answers. Normally, we just give the positive answer, right? Normally, we just give the positive answer because it's called, the positive answer to a square root is called the principal square root, or the one that's mainly used. So that's why we always just give the positive one. But every so often, you do have to write both answers, the positive version of the answer or the negative, because it has two answers. And sometimes you do need to show both answers. So let me give you an example of another situation where you have to show both answers to a square root. If they ask you this question, and it will come up, number 7, what are the square roots of 144? What are the square roots of 144? Question mark. Go ahead and write that down. What are some clues that you need more than one answer here? There's some verbal clues here. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, there's. It doesn't say what is, it's what are, and then roots. If they're asking this, this is the problem that should be thinking about. This is basically asking you to answer this. So first of all, what's the square root of 144? 12, right? 12 times 12 is 144. But if you see that they want what are the square roots, you want the two answers, which are, in this case, 12. Uh-huh. So we want both of those answers. Okay. The other possibility is if this is in an equation form. Okay. If you're asked to answer an equation like this. Some number squared equals 16. If they ask you to solve an equation, when we solve an equation, we want all the possible answers. So this equation leads to this type of problem. Plus or minus the square root of 16. Because we want to know what number to the second power is 16. And there's two possibilities, right? One of them is 4, because 4 times 4 is 16. Or negative 4, because negative 4 times negative 4 is 16. Okay? All right. So what if you get this one? T squared equals T squared equals 676. If I see that, what's the problem, square root problem that tells me to write? Plus or minus what? Square root of 676. And I don't know about you, but I'm not sure. Guess where I'm going to go? Well, Google's good, but I got this. 676. What's the square root of 676? 26. The cube root, by the way, of 17,576 is also 26. So that's for the cube root. But I needed the square root. There it is. Go back. So now I can answer the question. The answer is negative 26 or 26. Both of those. So when they give you an equation, and you'll have an IXL where they give it to you in equation form, you give both answers. Okay? All right, we're almost done. Just want to do a little bit with the cube roots. And this will be short and quick. So let's move on to cube roots. So the cube root is the one that looks like this. Has the little 3 there. So, for example, say I want the cube root of 8. That's a popular one because it's easy. So what we're asking there is, what number to the third power equals 8? So what number times itself 3 times is 8? Let's see. What do you think? Could it be 1? 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. So it can't be 1. How about 2? 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. So guess what? It's 2. So you're asking yourself, what number times itself 3 times equals the number inside the root symbol? Okay? All right. Well, let's figure out a couple. Cube root of 27. Cube root of 27. We're asking ourselves, what number times itself 3 times equals 27? Well, it can't be 2 because that would be 8. Let's try 3. 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 3 is 27. So it's 3. Now, I'm going to go back to the chart. Cube roots get big real fast. See, the cube root of 27 is 3, like we just said. The cube root of 1,728 is 12, because 12 times 12 times 12 is 1,728. So if you need to find the cube roots of numbers on the chart, you look at the third. The cube root of 8,000 is 220. Okay? So that's going to be handy there. Now, here's the catch. Should write that down. Cube root of negative 8. The cube root of negative 8. What number times itself 3 times negative 2? Actually, it would be negative 2. Because negative 2 to the third power is negative 8. Think about it. Negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. 4 times negative 2, negative 8. Okay? So this will be the last one. The cube root of negative 216. Well, that tells me to write this. So do you notice that you can do cube roots of negative numbers? Like, remember we couldn't do square roots of negative numbers? It turns out if the root number, the 3 there, if that number that goes there is an odd number, a 3, a 5, a 7, a 9, etc., you can do negatives. If it's even, a square root, which is 2, a fourth root, a sixth root, an eighth root, etc., you can't do negatives inside because of the way negatives work. So we need the square root of 216. What number times itself is 216? I'm going to go to that chart. Let's take a look at the chart. 216, what's the cube root of 216? What's the number all the way over here? So you always go here and then go all the way to the left. 6. 6 times 6 times 6 is 216. So the cube root of negative 216 is negative 6. Okay. All right. So this is what we're going to be working on today. It's 3 IXLs, but if you use the chart correctly, they actually go pretty quickly. Yes, think of it as kind of like the power. All right. So